Go for it.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining. As Andrew mentioned, a record number of registrants for this forum. It's our fifth forum that we've had as MEP 2040. Our first one was about a year ago today. So a lot of great success, a lot of really great momentum building around our initiative here. So we're really excited to be back here in the new year with everyone. So today, you know, in the past forums, we've talked to owners, we've talked with policymakers, we've talked with other designers about this ambitious goal of reducing and eliminating embodied carbon for MEP. And, you know, what's really important at this point is that we bring our manufacturer friends and partners and perspective to this voice, their voices to this discussion as well. As we put out for the forum, you know, the value of this data is so important to getting all these things moving forward, and manufacturers are key partners in doing this. Because without the data on the equipment that we're specifying and putting into our buildings, we're not going to get very far. So we've invited 3 guests from major MEP manufacturers, Carrier, Trane, and Technologies, and Ductsox. So they're going to be presenting and talking with us today about their journey, their thoughts on embodied carbon, how it looks from their perspective, which I think will give us all a lot of really great insight into you know, how to work together on this moving forward. So really excited about this discussion today, and looking forward to the discussion and conversation afterward. So overall agenda for today, we'll just do a really quick welcome, but really want to dive right into the forum. So we'll hear some presentations from each of our presenters, which we'll introduce in a minute. And then as those presentations are going along, feel free to put your questions into the chat that we'll save for the roundtable. But as they come up, go ahead and put them in there just so we have them at the ready. So after each of the 3 present, we'll have each of the 3 presenters kind of give a perspective back on maybe what they've heard from one another for about 10 minutes. And then we'll go to the audience for general Q&A and discussion on the topic. So the nice thing is this will be recorded as well, so other people that weren't able to attend can watch it just by going to the MEP 2040 website. Then we'll kind of close up. We've been working on some draft specification language for this that we'll just briefly introduce today, because it pairs well with the manufacturer perspective, and then briefly talk about potential incubator opportunities to maybe move some of these forward with different manufacturers as well. And then we'll go over some general working group updates. Because our group is pretty large, our steering committee that we have here, a diverse set on the steering committee, from architects, engineers, nonprofits, Andrew, who was on earlier from CLF, and other consultants working really hard on moving this forward. So we're thankful for the steering committee. We're also very thankful for all the working groups and everyone else participating in the forum and helping move all of this going forward. So just as a reminder for those that maybe are on for the first time, our goal is to get to zero carbon for our projects by 2040 and the embodied carbon from MEP systems. So it's going to be a road to get there, but for the signatories that have joined, we really have 4 requirements or 4 primary goals, each company establishing a plan for their reduction over the next decade plus to hit this goal. Because refrigerants are such a big part of the embodied carbon of MEP, committing to requesting low GWP refrigerant is a tenet. And then focused on EPDs and data, which is a big part of this discussion, this forum today. And then finally, participating in these forums quarterly is a requirement as well. So that's generally our commitment for folks that have signed up. And our numbers continue to grow. We're over 63 signatory MEP firms, 31 supporting organizations, a lot of working group members in our 5th forum. And we do have a new LinkedIn page up and running. So remind all you to go to LinkedIn right now if you're not already following us, so you'll get updates here for the forums and updates for other things that are going on as well. So with that, we will jump into the main part of our discussion, which is the forum. So I'll introduce the speaker ahead of each presentation, then we'll just switch over to share screen from their decks as well. So first up, we have Nick Paschke with Ductsox. So Nick can give a further introduction, but you can see his background here. 27 years with Ductsox, solid inventor on over 12 patents, which is very impressive. And so a lot of really great experience with this product, and I believe has some EPDs at Ductsox too, so he can talk about his journey. So I will stop sharing here and pass it to Nick.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Adam. I appreciate the opportunity to present today. Give me just one moment to pull up the screen. Are we successful? On your end, are you seeing it?
Yep, we got it.
Wonderful. Yes. Wonderful. Well, and being with the company as long as I have and traveling as much as I have, it's kind of funny because I like to sometimes tip a hat a little bit to the markets I'm traveling to, and it just happened to be in LA today. So I just wanted to tip a nod to a customer that has our product in one of their facilities. For those of you that aren't familiar with Ductsox, our name seems to have captured some customer knowledge in the marketplace of what we do. Just for those that don't, the product and the concept is essentially replacing sheet metal ductwork for the air distribution side of a mechanical system. And the textiles and materials, it's a little bit different, but for us, we've always been innovative and kind of if anything, try to be a catalyst of change and try and do things differently in the marketplace. And our applications include a significant range of different types of projects, and for various reasons, there's significant benefits. And our history with doing things differently is not only with product applications, but as we look at our history with, you know, the whole initiatives with energy efficiency and green buildings. Early on, we started with a customer out of Minneapolis that many of us, I'm sure, are familiar with, and they had an Energy Star initiative to look at trying to reduce energy in the stock rooms in their facilities. And we did a whole Energy Star series with them and did a research to find out that, you know, more outlets actually are much more efficient than fewer larger diffusers. It's fairly intuitive when you look at a photo, and marketing hates that I use it, but it's real. And but ultimately, this is a simple example of where we look at that energy efficiency. We've also been involved with the first green build project with the David L. Lawrence Center, that project out there. So we got involved in the green build very early. Well, and then we even, as with our product being more visual, it's also architectural. So we started to lean more towards the LEED program and found that the interesting challenges in the marketplace where there was really no place for mechanical systems. And so we started to add recycled content, and then we found out years later that no one was really interested in recycled content in the mechanical system because they didn't have a means to grade it. So, you know, as we got into conversations there, we started doing more energy studies of, hey, well, let's look at this again and determine that improvement of air delivery. So we did energy studies there, and we've done significant energy studies in different marketplaces, from the labs, the data centers, underfloor, and kitchens. So we've continually tried to look at how the product can perform and really where we see significant performance gains. And then we've also looked at the healthy building perspective, or the healthy product perspective, I'm sorry, in looking at those elements of considerations of what exactly goes into the material in the product and all the components. So we've been looking at the components in our product in a slightly different way. And where our story really starts was an email, oddly, from March of 21, that from a customer that said, hey, this is great. You know, we were very familiar with your costing, but have you done a carbon impact study? And they said, we should really get an EPD. Of course, with that initiative, unfamiliar with EPD, I Googled, and actually went internally to our engineering team and started doing more analysis. And again, this is 2 years ago, and trying to identify, you know, what it was, what our next steps were, who in the mechanical space has them, does anyone have them? What do they really tell a customer? What does a customer do with it? How much does it cost? Those types of questions, as I'm sure any manufacturer would go through to identify, you know, putting together a carbon score for a product. And for us, it was pretty intriguing in that, you know, ultimately, we've always been trying to look at how do we show the value of our products differently than the industry standard. And for us, it's, you know, really then it became, where do we start and who can help us? And who were our real advocates to go through. And oddly enough, one of our partners that we work with is we immediately went back to our supply chain. And one of the companies that we absolutely respect the most is Milliken. And they live in that architectural the fabrics, textiles, carpet, that world of making sure that they can have as much recycled content and or the story correct and the story within their factories all correct on their low carbon footprint. And so we spent a lot of time with them, and they of course introduced us to WAP, Sustainability Consulting, and in looking at them as a partner of, dare I say, Sherpa-ing us through the process of what to do, where, and how to do that. And then, of course, WAP brought us back to the post, which is the certification process, which was with UL. And for those that haven't been through it, the process, if you will, of the stages would be, you know, we were very fortunate that there was a PCR existing for metal ductwork that we could use as a baseline, and WAP helped identify that right away. And then the process is to go, of course, through the LCA and the EPD, and then go through the certification process, and certainly helped us work through that process. The other thing about Ductsox, we're a fairly small company relative to, I'm sure, the other presenters and several others in the industry, but we're owned by a larger organization called Right Height. And Right Height does more loading dock levelers and equipment in industrial and warehousing space, but they're a family-owned business, and their mantra is always looking ahead. And what should we be looking to in the future? What types of things should we be doing differently? And how do we take care of our customers more appropriately in the future? And as we stepped back with them, with our leadership, both within Right Height, but then also within Ductsox, you know, that we definitely had buy-in from the executive level right away for, this is something that we see coming, and we see an interest and a need for it. And this was starting, like I said, almost 2 years ago. And work through the details. Our engineering team worked through we helped with the whys a little bit on the sales front, but it was more the cost and the time commitment for our team to go through the process. And then the stretch benefits, you know, is maintaining our market leadership position, but are there other things that we could gain from that? In our specific product, obviously, it's hard for us to capture as much once it's in the customer's hands or control that in the evaluation process. So we did most of our evaluation from cradle to gate, all the way through the transportation of our product, which obviously ships mostly by UPS, so it's pretty favorable. But then also the disposal on the tail end. In looking at the components themselves, I mean, some of the more taxing elements for us was really because we have multiple factories, we have many different vendors that we work with. I'm sure just like any manufacturer would. And ours was to come up with the BOMs for each of the product that we had on hand, but we didn't have it in the same evaluation as we do now as a result of going through this process. And then looking at energy consumption or water usage and all the things that we were aware of, but not in the same scope at our manufacturing facilities. And then also looking at even the packaging materials. Just yesterday I had some emails about, you know, what plastic we're using in packaging our product. It's interesting to see some of those things start to come to the surface that never would really be a consideration in the past. The BOMs themselves, you know, ultimately this is really where some of the, you know, it's all stuff we have to do within the manufacturing and with our supply chains, but come up with a mass and a volume for each of the components and identify every little detail. This BOM happens to be for, we own another company as well, I'll talk about in a second, but this happens to be for a fan. But as it works out, it's something that our team is really good at going through that process. They became very, very, because we've done several of them now, it's become very routine of, okay, let's just run through the process, make sure we've got everything. They've got a process in place for how to document it. It really worked out well. And then of course, for the EPD documentation, it's going through capturing all the rest of the, I'll say somewhat marketing materials, but then also other information that is expected to be shared within that's, you know, some elements that we haven't before. And it's really nice to see some of those actually come to the surface. Little things like even the VOCs, where our product does have a little bit of benefit in that we're not painting or doing anything on site where there's much lower VOC emissions. Timeline that we saw on the project, the initial scope, I think, was in the 7-month time period. I think it probably got closer to 11 months. But I think in those 11 months, they completed 3 EPDs, which were, the reason we broke it up into 3 is we have different ways that we support and suspend our product or put structure inside the product so it doesn't deflate. So we developed and came up with the 3 different measurements, and it's basically one that has very simple structure to obviously on the right, the FTS with a bit more complex structure. but the difference in products, ultimately, the one on the right, carries a 20-year warranty. So it's a much different customer valued product, if you will, with the FTS. And internally, we're actually taking some of that information and starting to look at developing some quick calculations, because the GWP is basically calculated based on a per meter surface area of the product. So we can very quickly start to evaluate tonnage of CO2 equivalent offsets or GWPs based on product line. So we can look at our FTS or IHS or traditional, and based on a diameter and a length and specific criteria, come up with some information that's very useful for a customer to consider. And it's a relatively light footprint. As far as for what's the future, what are we be doing next? Now that we've gone through this process, we're actually looking at other products. Somewhere near the beginning of our process in developing our EPDs for Ductsox, we actually acquired another company with the destratification fans, or Zoo company, and we actually have those EPDs. I think they're about 95% completed, if I recall. They're probably coming out end of March, early April, so it'll be our fourth. We're also, again, being part of a larger organization, suddenly it's become an initiative within our parent company. So now we have a work group internally that they can reach out to leads in our group that have done the work so far, and suddenly it's something that's becoming kind of an internal culture of which products are we going to look at, where does it make the most sense, and details with that. The other things that it's helped us with is in the product development phase, where historically we would look at things more from a cost or a long-term durability, not always with the same carbon footprint mentality. And now that we have the BOMs for all of our products, as we go through, we can start to isolate specific components and look at the carbon impact of changes in each one of those component categories. And one example, I mean, we're significantly looking at recycled content again, and our suppliers are, on board with looking at it. Well, it would significantly reduce the carbon in just that one element, let alone some other things that we can look at. The challenge, I will say, is that when we came off of developing our EPDs, it was really interesting in that we have them. Now, what do we do with them? And our marketing team was robust to tell our sales team, hey, here's the information on our website, take it to customers that are looking for it. And we didn't find a lot of customers looking for it initially. And that was part of the initial struggle for us. Is we've invested, we see this great technology. And of course, in working within the industry, we understand that we really don't want to spend a lot of time comparing our product to others or whatever. We just want to make sure we present the information in a useful manner. But for us, that was part of the challenge, was just making sure the information is available, but finding a better way to carry that forward, and which I'll talk about in a moment. And then for us, we also want to look at adjusting future documentation. So if we have proposals, like when we send out proposals for Ductsox, we actually include a freight estimator, an installation estimator for our contractors, so they know how much time it takes to install right on the proposals. I could see in the future that we'll start putting GWP or the carbon mass consideration for the products that are in the proposals. That's something that could be carried through relatively easily, given the nature of our product. Now, market feedback. I think one of the interesting market feedbacks that I've gotten since engagement with MEP 2040 has been, the sales network themselves. And I think they really didn't know what to do with EPDs, other than, again, being here in California, there's a little bit more of an accelerated path for decarbonization with some of the state mandates and initiatives. But I think it's, for them, they really like the idea that it kind of helps tell a slightly different story specifically about our product, but it helps them take something to their engineers. So for that is really something I'm seeing is a bit different. And then for us, we're also identifying and approaching strategic customers that are valuing the EPDs. And the example of that is we had one customer that was targeting a 20% reduction in their overall mechanical system in their projects, and they did their own independent evaluation of fabric versus their traditional solution that they were using with rigid metal duct and diffusers. And they found that basically the carbon offset to switch to fabric was about a 70% reduction in carbon on their own analysis. So as we look at that moving forward, we want to work and engage with more clients and find out from their perspective and their own studies to identify what their story would be using our product. The pleasant surprises was that internal engagement with our R&D. They initially asking them to do a lot of analysis or production, asking them to do all the homework to equate the products. It's pretty interesting to see. And I'll just say the joke because I'll share. I talked with our production, director of production, and I asked him, frankly, I said, well, how many hours do you think you had in putting it together? And his response was pretty jagged. He said, what does it care if we're saving the world? I said, fair, never mind. And I'm really surprised by how our production team has jumped onto the process and really grabbing it, if you will. The other big surprise for us was this group, finding MEP 2040 and looking at engineers that are actually seeking EPDs or seeking products that do have a lower carbon footprint. That's been something that is really a benefit for us. And I think that's been a game changer from where we first got our EPDs completed to where we are today. That's a huge change. And then lastly, the big surprise again was that interest from the sales network. Immediately, and I think we've talked before a little bit as a group internally about this, but there's an army of people between the manufacturers and the engineers that specify products and customers, and that army is always looking for a story to tell. And I think as they're identifying, the interest and the need for reduced carbon in product, they on decarbonization, especially here in California, talking a little bit about the decarbonization efforts that we have and our story has really seemed to invigorate their interest in our product. And because it's definitely something that is working really well for them. Any questions? Actually, did you say you want to pause until after, Adam?
Yeah, Nick, we'll pause and do that after the roundtable. But thanks. I love that. What's it matter if it's going to save the planet? It's a new mantra. I love it.
I'm saving that email.
I can justify a lot of lost time for that. That's good.
Yeah, it was pretty blunt, but we love him for that. It's great.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Nick.
You bet. Thank you.
All right. So next up, we will go to Swati with Trane Technologies. So she focuses on circularity of Trane's products and previous roles with AT&T and Home Depot. So Swati has been a regular participant also in the EPD and manufacturer working group that Christy Walson and myself and others are very active in. So we're appreciative for that. So with that, Swati, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Adam. So I'm just going to pull up my presentation here. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Yep, it's good.
Thank you. So my agenda for today, hello everybody, my name is Swati Ramaswamy. I'm product stewardship leader here at Trane Technologies. So I'm excited to be here to discuss our company's sustainability journey. I'll start with an introduction to our company and our 2030 commitments. I will discuss our embodied carbon and why it's important to our key stakeholders. I will walk through our refrigerant journey as well as circularity, which are both closely tied to embodied carbon. And I will cover the results of an EPD that we just published in February and some of our key takeaways. And I will end with our most recent announcements on steel. So as you all probably know, we are a big player in the heating and cooling space. We are a world leader in heating and cooling systems and solutions. We bring efficient and sustainable climate innovations to buildings, homes, and transportation. To put some numbers behind our company, we have 36,000 employees around the globe, 35 manufacturing locations worldwide, and with about $16 billion in sales in 2022. So about 10 years ago, we led the HVAC industry transition to low GWP refrigerants. We established our first set of climate commitments at that time with a target year of 2020. So that included a 50% reduction in the GHG footprint of our products and 35% reduction in our operational footprint. And we exceeded them 2 years early in 2018. So in 2019, we raised the stakes again. That's when we announced our 2030 commitments, which included what we call the Gigaton Challenge. That's a pledge to reduce our customers' carbon emissions by 1 billion metric tons through everything from improving energy efficiency, electrification, system energy monitoring, and continuing the journey to transition to even lower GWP refrigerants. In addition, we are also leading by example with goals around carbon neutral operations, zero waste to landfill, and net positive water use. That's all within our own operations, within our manufacturing facilities and other facilities. We are also one of only 50 companies in the world to have 2 sets of carbon commitments validated by the Science Based Targets Initiative. And finally, our opportunity for all goals focused on diversity, inclusion, as well as safety in the workplace. So we are well positioned to address some of the biggest challenges confronting our planet today. 15% of the world's carbon emissions is from the heating and cooling of buildings. Another 10% is from food loss. So we can tackle a quarter of these emissions, and we don't take that responsibility lightly. So that's the reason why we've set these very lofty 2030 commitments, and we continue to make good progress towards achieving them. So I'm going to talk about embodied carbon. As probably everybody here is familiar with, it's really all of that product's life cycle carbon footprint, with that exclusion of the use phase energy, or what is called the operational carbon. So why is this important? As buildings tend to high performance and net zero, emissions shift from operating carbon to embodied carbon, the total carbon footprint. And we see a similar shift on the transport side from gas, diesel to electrified transport. And that becomes important for our Thermo King brand, which is all about cold chain transport. So the embodied carbon, due to the use of steel, aluminum, refrigerants, represent the harder to abate industry sectors. So prioritizing early is important, and we certainly acknowledge that. And we think there's a close tie between circularity and embodied carbon. It's an enabler in reducing that total embodied carbon footprint, because it takes a lot of energy and fuel to mine, extract, and process raw materials like aluminum and steel and plastics that we use in large quantities in our product. So if we can reuse and repurpose those materials instead of mining for them, so that can greatly lower that embodied carbon. And up to 45% of emission savings globally can be achieved through circularity by some estimates. And with many of our customers making embodied carbon reduction a priority through participation in groups like MEP 2040 and others, it's certainly top of mind for us as an organization to meet our customers' needs and expectations. So this talks about, all of the demand drivers we are seeing. We lead the industry in our sustainability and climate innovation, and many of our customers and external stakeholders are looking to us for leadership in these areas. Historically, we've seen a huge focus on the emissions reduction from the use of our products, our customers' scope 1 and 2 emissions. But here in the last few years, we see increasing expectations that go beyond the use of our products to that whole product life cycle. So from the embodied carbon side, there's a need for life cycle assessments, measuring whole life carbon and reducing upstream supply chain emissions. And from a circularity perspective, there's an increasing expectation around the use of recycled materials, reuse and take back programs. So all of these are going beyond that use phase. And it's not just customers. We see investors that look to rating agencies like the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, SASB. They're also all focused on metrics that go beyond the use phase to that entire product life cycle. And finally, regulatory trends that we are seeing around the globe, such as the upcoming EU regulations on eco-design and circular economy, are also looking at that whole product life cycle. So here I touch upon our leadership on the refrigerant transition from all the way many decades ago from CFCs to HFCs to lower GWP refrigerants. I mentioned earlier our original climate commitments, which was to lead the industry ahead of Kigali with lower GWP refrigerants. And we were one of the first to introduce several low GWP refrigerants that you see on the right-hand side of the slide. So on circularity, we have a 2030 goal on circularity because there's a close tie again between circularity and embodied carbon. As a part of that, we are looking at materials, design, and services to close the loop on products, components, and materials. So we are working with several of our suppliers to increase the use of recycled materials like steel, aluminum, cast iron, copper, and we are working with them to decarbonize primary materials as well. On the design side, we're continuously improving how we can design for disassembly, maintenance, reuse, remanufacturing, so we can keep these products, materials, and assets in use longer. And we're also implementing modular design and component standardization techniques that drive better circularity outcomes. And finally, we have a whole slew of services that we are offering to extend product life, such as repair and maintenance, intelligent services, digital services. We have an upgrade program that assesses old equipment and upgrades key components to bring them to current efficiency standards. We have remanufacturing operations that then takes back those old components, like compressors and motors, and gives them a new life by disassembling them, repairing or replacing necessary parts, and reassembling the product to original specifications. So also in partnership with EPA certified reclaimers around US and our Trane supply locations, we are supporting the collection of used refrigerants to reduce those high GWP emissions. We have, as a part of that reclaim program, we have rewards program at our Trane supply stores to incentivize the return of refrigerants at end of life. And this service is available to anyone in the HVAC community, as we accept refrigerants from any brand, not just our own. So with that, I go to talk about our EPD. So we've been the first in the HVAC industry to create an EPD for centrifugal chillers back in 2011. So it has an associated PCR, and we recently updated this EPD for 3 models: the Simplex brand of Centrovac chillers, the Duplex, and the Agility centrifugal chillers. These are manufactured here in the US and also in China. This EPD is available in the UL Spot database when you search for Trane technologies and chillers, and it literally just was released last month. So again, it's the new one. We've had one for, now since 2011. And what it does, Nick covered a lot about, what EPDs mean, the background and the data collection. So I won't go into all that, but essentially it maps out the environmental impacts across that whole product life cycle of the chiller, and including the carbon footprint, which is super important. So the first graph on the top shows you the carbon footprint across that 75-year building service life. Again, that was the way the PCR was defined for the full building life, not just the product life. So that includes 1 chiller that's 25 years life and 2 replacements, a total of 3 chillers. And you can see that operational energy used due to electricity dominates that product carbon footprint with over 98.5% of the impact. So then what I did is I parsed out that operational energy use. We parsed out the replacements and said, okay, what is the carbon footprint of that 1 chiller, that remaining 1.5%, right? What is that? So you can see that it's largely the raw materials, that's the steel, the copper, the refrigerants, that correlate to the amount of material weight for each of those materials in the chiller. And then there's also the contribution from the maintenance, which is the refrigerant leakage and replenishment. And this is mainly driven by this agility model, which uses R134A. That's the one that we modeled for the EPD. The other two chillers use very low GWP refrigerants, R514A and R1233ZD, which have EPD of, GWP of 1 to 2. So those are very low GWP refrigerants. So the R impacts are very negligible. So those are the two big contributors. There's a small contributor from our own manufacturing process, but you can see that the transportation and other impacts were, I mean, calling them round of error would be generous. So they're really very minimal. So the total project time, even with the PCR that was created many years ago, it still took us 15 months end to end. And for a total of 1,700 hours, that's both our internal time as well as the external third parties who helped create the EPD as well as validate it. So UL was the validator of our EPD as well. So that's 1,700 hours and a cost, again, if you add up all the time, that's the total cost of over 125K. So it's very involved and quite intense. And what we found is some of the data, like transportation, took a lot of time to collect, but was very low impact, as you can see. So that was, and it's really because of the complexity of the HVAC bombs, right? We have these bombs are, you know, a couple of thousand components across a few hundred suppliers. So collecting and validating all that BOM and supply chain data took a tremendous amount of time for us. So that's on our EPD and a little more in terms of benefits. So they definitely provide a scientific and standardized approach to mapping the environmental impacts of our products. And as engineers, we all love scientific approaches. They provide insights into hotspots that you saw on the graph before, and they allow comparisons between products amongst competitors as long as the underlying assumptions are similar. But we feel that they have several challenges too. For the complex bombs of HVAC, you spend a lot of time and resources gathering data that may ultimately not be all that impactful, like the transportation piece I mentioned. You know, we know these equipment are heavy energy using equipment. So a lot of the impact we saw was obviously on the operational energy use side. And even with all the data we gathered, we still have to rely on some global averages in the LCA modeling software for raw materials, such as steel or copper, because those go to tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. And I mean, the scope of the LCA was really just the tier 1 suppliers. So this may not really be representative of the total product supply chain. And then another call out is that the operational energy use calculations, that 98.5, that's a global average across 55 cities around the globe as defined by the PCR. So it's not all that accurate to use it as a proxy for your building project, which can vary widely based on the geography, the application, the load, and many other factors for, again, your project. And finally, if the assumptions in the EPD are not exactly the same, then they can limit the extent to which you can make an apples to apples comparison. So I think you use it as a directional guide. So we believe that EPD is one tool in the toolkit of measuring and reducing embodied carbon of our products. So there's many LCA approaches and software available to calculating the embodied carbon, including CTM65 that several of the folks here are familiar with. And so these approaches should be considered in conjunction and as alternatives to EPDs to efficiently estimate, prioritize, and most importantly, really drive the reductions in embodied carbon across products and materials. We already know that from the EPDs and LCAs we have done, and we've done this for some of our transport products too, that the embodied carbon comes from the materials as well as from the higher GWP refrigerants. So as I've already shared in my presentation so far, we are working on prioritizing the decarbonization of those materials and the components. And that's a good segue to my next slide, which is, sorry, let's sit there. Which is to talk about our net zero steel commitment. So we have committed to procuring net zero steel for 50% of our purchases, of our steel purchases by 2030 and 100% by 2050. And we are already at 20% of our purchases today are already net zero steel in collaboration with two of our steel suppliers, Nucor and US Steel. So we are definitely with the updates to the lower GWP refrigerants, and we're all our work on reducing and decarbonizing our primary materials. We believe we are well on this journey, and this steel announcement is proof of that. So with that, I wrap up my presentation. I'm very thankful to MEP 2040 for giving us this opportunity to talk about our journey, our sustainability and embodied carbon journey. And I think we'll open it up for questions once the third presenter is done.
Thank you so much, Swati. Really appreciate that. And actually, for those, there's some Q&A going in the chat now. So if you do have questions as you go along, go ahead and put it in there. And then we'll have a question about zero energy or net zero steel. Interesting topic for sure. So next we will go to Valerie. Let me logistics here. So Valerie, Associate Director of HVAC Engineering Sustainability for Carrier. She's been with Carrier over 11 years, managing ESG goals. And sounds like there's also a gigaton goal with Carrier as well. So with that, we will welcome Valerie.
Adam, go ahead and share my screen. Okay, you see it?
Yep, that's good.
Great. Okay, so yeah, thank you for having me at the forum today, and thanks everyone who's attending for your commitment to achieving net zero carbon in your projects. It's like Adam said, I'm Valerie Lisi, Associate Director for HVAC Engineering Sustainability at Carrier. Also joining today is Tristan Aben. He's our Value Engineering Manager, who started Design for Sustainability at Carrier. So he'll be joining me in this presentation. I'm truly just really proud to work for a company that has ESG in its DNA. It's embedded at every level of our business and supported by our, similar to Trane's, ambitious 2030 goals that address our planet, people, and communities. So today we're going to focus on our impacts with the planet and how we can help our customers to achieve your ESG goals. So a quick overview of Carrier. You're probably familiar with our HVAC products for commercial and residential buildings, but that's only about half of what we do. We're also global leaders in refrigeration and fire and security. We have almost 60,000 employees globally, and we're working hard to release hundreds of products each year that are bringing solutions to our customers, including higher efficiency products and lower GWP refrigerants. So here's a summary of our 2030 ESG goals. These are commitments that Carrier made in 2020. One of our most important goals is the gigaton. So that's reducing the carbon emissions of our customers by more than a gigaton, which is over 2 trillion pounds of carbon equivalent by 2030. We're making really good progress against this target. In only 2 years, we helped our customers avoid 137 million metric tons of GHG emissions. One example of a Carrier initiative that contributed to that goal is that all commercial refrigeration systems that we sell use CO2 as a refrigerant, which has a GWP of 1. So these would be used in in grocery stores, and they have really high charge and notoriously large leak rates. So it's a really big impact to use CO2 as a refrigerant there. Carrier is also committed to reducing our energy intensity by 10% across our operations, achieving carbon neutral operations by 2030, and zero waste to landfills and manufacturing. Just this month, Carrier's chiller manufacturing site in Charlotte, North Carolina, became our second site in North America to do zero waste to landfill. We're really proud of that. Okay, at Carrier, we are always challenging ourselves to think better and think bigger and do better, which brings us to science-based targets. So in a way that countries can sign up for the Paris Agreement or Montreal Protocol, this is a similar initiative, but targeted towards corporations. And commitments like this are especially important for HVAC manufacturers. The building sector accounts for 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and HVAC systems account for about 40% of a building's energy consumption. So a quote from Spider-Man movies, with great power comes great responsibility. And that lies on the HVAC industry and system engineers. So we have this huge challenge, but also a huge opportunity to make a difference. So experts have agreed that if our global temperature increases 2% Celsius, it would be really catastrophic. Melting of the polar ice caps, loss of entire ecosystems, widespread famine. So Carrier is committed to do our part to avoid that. So we have signed up for 1.5 degree C target. And to get there, we will do net zero greenhouse gas emissions across our value chain by 2050. And so that means net zero for customers using our products. Really ambitious goal that we're really excited about. A little bit about sustainable buildings. We talked about the big impact that buildings have on emissions globally. And so there's a really growing market for sustainable and intelligent buildings. Carrier's here to help our customers find sustainable solutions throughout that building. So a couple of our offerings, we have a really efficient screw chiller. The 23 XRV is 42% more efficient than the industry standard. We offer products with low GWP refrigerants. Carrier was the first to announce our transition to R454B in residential products, which is the lowest GWP replacement for R410A. And we're also offering LCAs for many of our commercial HVAC products that we manufacture in Europe. And we're going to have more coming soon from North America. So Carrier is very proud to announce that we've already published 31 LCAs for our products manufactured in Europe. They're in the form of the PEP Eco Passport. So PEP stands for Product Environmental Profile. It is very similar to EPDs, like have already been discussed. They also follow ISO 14025 and require verification. It's just essentially the European version of that. And you can go to the PEP Eco Passport website and view them. We have 18 of ours are under Carrier, and then 13 are under SEAT, which is part of Carrier. In North America, we are working on 19MV, which is a water-cooled centrifugal chiller with magnetic bearings. As you saw from Trane and Ductsox, it takes a very long time to do these assessments, and we are wrapping ours up shortly. Very excited to move on and do more. So next, I'm going to pass it over to Tristan. He's going to talk to you about the actions Carrier's taking to get ahead in the design process for sustainability.
Thanks, Val. So hello, everyone. It's good to be with you here today. Just a quick, what is my background? I am a mechanical engineer and economist here at Carrier. For the past 3 years now, I've been heading up our value engineering team, specifically focused on cost modeling, both legacy products and new products. Part of our effort in the past year has been working around design for sustainability. Part of that is really what we can do on our side in our cost modeling to broaden it instead of just focused on cost. And our main driver that we use for our costing is a priori. Specifically, today we're really focusing in on the carbon footprint for new product development and using this platform as a way to help our design engineers make better decisions up front and make them more automated instead of having to sit down and really educate not only our workforce, but also our entire organization. This is a way that brings us all together in a much more cohesive manner. And that way, when we make our carbon footprints, we're making good decisions faster. Next slide. So what is a priori and how are we using it? From a high level, a priori is a software provider that we have been partnered with for over 3 years now. And that has been a very rewarding partnership for us. We have helped with a priori and many different features on the software side to help build in more features for not only us, but everyone that uses this software to help everyone. And for what we are looking at today, what we see is a sustainable transformation through this software and then through our team and centralized engineering ops teams. Really what we have been looking at is for decades now, really the way that business has been done has virtually gone unchanged. Virtually, you still have the same process steps along the way when you are building new products. And we would like to radically change that in a way that makes us more agile, have less cost, and also lean carbon designs that truthfully are changing the planet and helping our customers at the same time. What you're seeing here is a representation of this new 21st century value stream that me and my team specifically work on every single day to get into the various teams across the globe. And as you can see, really a priori has offerings in every single one of these areas in which we are trying to instill in every process along the way to help our designers, supply chain, and then even our suppliers themselves make better choices when it comes to carbon and cost. We do not see these as mutually exclusive. We see areas in which we can find cost reduction and carbon reduction at the same time. Next slide. I think the benefits are clear. I don't think it would come as much of a shock to anybody to see some of these things on the screen. As I said, upfront cost manufacturing carbon data that lives inside of our PLM and ERP systems. This is a radical change from what we've seen in the past where you have to virtually go through different systems and piece together things along the way. And it creates an environment in which design engineers can't make good decisions because they don't know what they don't know. What we want to do is bring these systems together. And that's what me and Carrier together have been striving for 3 years now. And we are seeing very good success. We want to deliver lean carbon parts to our suppliers faster. This will allow us to have a greater competitive edge in the marketplace and be more agile. We want to reduce our time to market and get it right the first time. This will create more time for innovation. Something that we strive for every day at Carrier is to make our products better, whether it be quality, cost, just pure function. We strive for that every single day, and we want to respond to market conditions. And that's where this software can really help our engineers make those decisions. This software is an industry standard. It is a software that has been out for a long time, but as part of our partnership, we've been in the early adopter program for the rough carbon footprinting that we are able to do inside this software. And it will finally be released later this year. And we're very, very happy to be working with a priori on something as ambitious as this. Thank you, everyone. Turn it back over to Val.
That's a wrap. I would say back to Adam.
Thank you, Val and Valerie and Tristan as well. So at this point, what we'd like to do is like to just take a few minutes with our three panelists, I guess, to kind of have an open forum from what you've heard. I mean, the panel group, we did meet, a few weeks back to talk about overall the making sure to convey to the audience, what the journey was like, what are some the positives, what are some of the negatives, and all the presentations had that. But I guess, were there anything in hearing one another present that kind of came up to you, or good points of discussion that we might want to convey to the group today?
Is someone fielding the questions from the chat, or should we ask them now in person?
I see one here that's directed towards Carrier. So the CO2 refrigeration systems, we only do commercial refrigeration in Europe. However, we do have CO2 in our transport refrigeration systems that are offered here in the US. You want to look at our natural line units.
Yeah, and I can field some of the questions from the chat too. And I think some of the ones focused on the overall process. I think one question that came up, what can make it easier and cheaper for the manufacturers to produce EPDs? I know Swati talked about the cost with chiller, which I know is a very complex piece of equipment. There are less complex pieces of equipment as well, but from your perspective, what are some easier or cheaper methods for that?
So I think if we focus on the hot spots, and I know EPDs they have a very robust defined process. You have to capture the transport impacts, the installation impacts, the end of life impacts, but we saw that largely for those were not even like a blip on the radar. So if we can focus on the hot spots, right? If you set aside the operational carbon for a second and focus on the hot spots, which is the raw materials and the leakage of the higher GWP refrigerants. And if we can focus on that and define that, I think that would be a much more, I think, rational approach. And I don't know if you would call that an EPD, maybe it's just a simplified LCA at that point.
I can add on to that. So we found that the initial cost is very high. The engineering hours that we put in to determine there's so much information that has to be gathered and distilled that goes into it. And it's a large effort on the corporation. But the more that we've done, then the database of materials that we use that is complete grows. And so each consecutive EPD or LCA or PEP that we do takes less time and less money. So our team in France, instead of having a turnaround time of months for their chillers, now it only takes them weeks.
Would you say that it's inherently more complicated than like a concrete mix?
Yes. As Swati said, our bill of materials for a water-cooled chiller, for example, they have thousands of components that come from hundreds of suppliers. They have electrical components in them. We have non-metallics. There's a very wide range of materials that go into our chillers. So as very complex units, I think it is more complex than concrete.
Is there there's a driver for doing the chiller first, where the operation is going to be huge, right? And then the rest of it is really big and complicated. But what about the other products that maybe the operational is smaller, but we know the embodied is higher. Is there any thought that maybe those could be prioritized ahead of time, or, what kind of weighs into those decisions about what to certify first from your standpoint?
Sure, I can give a first pass at answering that, and our other manufacturers might have a response as well. So at Carrier, we're really looking to bring solutions to our customers. And it's customers in our commercial HVAC space that have been requesting EPDs. And we're also driven by regulations in Europe. And so that is why we've started with chillers. And even though the operational carbon is very high right now, as we have greening of the grid, that impact is going to be reduced over time. And so the embodied carbon will become more important.
And in terms of product prioritization, that's we do think that there is we have to be thoughtful and intentional about where we are doing the next set of EPDs. So we are thinking through where there might be higher embodied carbon. For example, the air handlers, which really have a fan, it's not maybe as much energy using. And then of course, products that are strategic to our customers, heat pumps, for example. So those are all we are thinking through, and we think these simplified LCA approaches can tell us, hey, can we do them in mass, and then figure out, okay, we are honing in on 2 or 3 that have maybe more uncertainty, there's more embodied carbon, and then we go ahead and pursue an EPD. So that's our thinking. So it's I don't know that we have the answer yet, but that's our thinking.
Swati, you mentioned using SIBSI TM65 methods kind of in lieu of having an EPD, and I wonder if we could work with someone like Tristan. I know specifically you have a lot of materials knowledge, and being able to get together kind of what the raw material breakdown is to try to get the EPD light, I guess, in lieu of having an actual EPD for a product. Is that something that Trane or Carrier are thinking about? I know that Trane or Carrier, sorry, specifically have all of the PEPs available. So we kind of would have something to compare it to, but making that a US specific number. I know that ASHRAE is coming out with SIBSI TM65 method guidelines specific to the US so that we have our raw material kind of factors. Is that in either plan for Trane or Carrier?
Yes, 100%. We've seen some requests come from some of our customers last year where we were able to provide them material breakdowns. So we've begun to, collect and validate and, have that data available for more customers. So that's 100% the plan. And, the TM65, yes, there are some broad assumptions, but I think it's a great tool. And I'm part of that North America TM65 committee too, to again help to get those ballpark estimates, so then we can quickly figure out, okay, where is it? Is it the air handler that has a lot of embodied carbon? Is it for a building project? Is it the rooftop unit? So figure that piece out.
I can speak for Carrier on that. So as I showed, we have certainly looked at TM65. If it is a method that we certainly do use. Where we see the power, though, is that's still coming too late. So that is why we have to look at this from a different point of view. That's why we use the model. So as we all know, digital twin technology has really taken off in the past decade. Certainly Carrier is leading the way in digital twin technologies, looking at it from a design all the way to the point of handing off to our suppliers. And because of that, we have really good models now of our products, and we want to use that for calculations. I want to take as many assumptions out of the process as I possibly can. And that's where using the model and then doing geometric calculations in manufacturing simulations to actually see the cycle times, to actually see what is the manufacturing process that I could use. And the software can potentially look at different manufacturing routings and suggest to me, you could do this a different way and you get a carbon reduction doing it and possibly a cost reduction. Again, like I stressed, we don't look at those mutually exclusive. That's why me and my team have been pegged to help in this, because we strive every day for those reductions.
I think what's kind of woven in all this too, I think, as we've been working throughout the past year as a forum and the working groups and everything else, I mean, there's just such a desire just to have the data, because as engineers, we need to put that puzzle together to go to an owner and say, look, this is your MEP system. These are the top 10 things you need to care about. And then here's how much each one of these makes up in the embodied carbon piece. You know, and we feel like one of the biggest things we can do as a forum and as kind of an industry lead as MEP 2040 is maybe be able to be a communication conduit out to say, you know, these are the things that we as industry should be asking for now, and here's the right way to ask for it in order to get that picture together as most complete as we can. And maybe some of it is these are the things that need EPDs, because these are the things that have to have it because they're nuanced enough. These are the things that, you know, we can probably roughly calculate based on bill of materials or just generally known factors we have calculators for. And these are the things just not to worry about. So I guess, you know, part of the reason of having this forum with manufacturers is just understanding what those things are to help create that priority list, so we know what to ask for first, because we're likely to get it. So I don't know, it feels like there's a question in there, but it sounds like the modeling is part of it. It sounds like EPD is part of it, but really just having some communication about what to prioritize, I think is really important. So I don't know if there are any general thoughts around that from the panelists or others in the group.
Well, Adam, I would say, I mean, this is Nick with Ductsox. I mean, we maintain comparatively, we have a very small BOM relative to the equipment, and we don't really have an operating cost because most of our equipment doesn't plug in. But representing some of the other, you know, suppliers in the industry, I think that MEP 2040, like I said in our discussion, really builds the need for more awareness in the industry. And I think as we see things, just like today, I'm going to talk with our representatives here in LA and talk about EPDs and MEP 2040. I think it's really just getting the word spread. And I think that engagement with the team that works within this industry is going to help, because many of our manufacturers representatives are independents and they represent 30 to 40 companies. And if several have it, it becomes a groundswell of how do we raise that awareness instead of just deeper within the company. How do we get a broader spread between all the companies? And I think it's been really eye-opening for me to see that opportunity start to happen, and the discussion is more than just a little bit or more than a narrow channel. It's becoming widespread, and I think that's going to be a big factor in making it come to the surface.
What do you think, I guess, from each of the three perspectives, what's the best way to voice that so that it gets the appropriate attention within your manufacturer, within your organizations and other manufacturers? Like what is that message? Is it just having these forums and having, you know, LinkedIn pages we can promote to? Is it specs? Is it, what do you think is the most effective?
My personal opinion is it's going to be engagement. Like for us, it's direct engagement with our distribution, and just like make them aware. Suddenly, just last night, I was talking with one of the heads out here, and he basically, I just shared some of the companies that are signatories for MEP 2040. They had no idea. And I said, well, maybe we were talking about how do we approach engineers at some of the signatory companies that may not even know of their commitment. You know, so somehow we have to connect the dots from both sides and find a respectful way to introduce the initiative and kind of like, are you familiar that your company's on board with this? Because every engineering company has many engineers, you know, maybe narrowly represented here, but their communication in-house is more challenged too. And I end up talking with a lot of engineers on projects, and some large scale ones, and they're unfamiliar with their MEP 2040 until we talk through it. Then suddenly they do, but some of the upper level do, but some of the smaller or the teams actually doing design are less aware. So to me, it's all a communication vehicle on both sides.
Yeah, Swati or Valerie, what are your thoughts on how can it be the best message?
I mean, I give credit, big, huge credit to this group, MEP 2040. I mean, this quite, raised the visibility and elevated this conversation to many of our leaders. So definite credit to this group and many of the, building owners that you all work with. We are hearing the same, questions come to us from them too. In terms of what else could we do? I need to give it some thought. I mean, it's, again, the more demand we see out in the market. And of course, like I mentioned, there's, other lines of demand too. So I think the more we see, we want to show leadership, right? I mean, we don't want to be too late to the game. We want to show leadership. So we are also trying to stay one step ahead because right now it's, I mean, do we see every customer ask for it? No, but we want to stay ahead and have these things ready to go and be able to meet that customer's need when they do. So it's sort of the tailwind, so to speak, right now.
Yeah, I would say, Carrier is really grateful to have MEP 2040 presenting this challenge. Keeps us driving forward as we're always trying to help our customers and provide the solutions that you need. And over time, that changes. And we know that EPDs and embodied carbon are the future. And we're going to be working hard to be able to provide that in a timely fashion and provide what you need.
Are there any cross-cutting groups that manufacturers are engaged with on this topic? Ways to, maybe even produce some embodied carbon data without EPDs or come up with common calculation methods? Is there anything else like that? Or is this really the kind of the start of this journey, I guess, through this group?
Well, I think there's many groups that are cross-cutting. I mean, when we look at, let's just compare LCA softwares. I mean, in large part, most LCA softwares are relying off of the same data. I mean, there is a lot of different databases, but these are public sources. These are not sources that we are necessarily relying and making up ourselves. So from our perspective, as we, I think, are talking about, in both Trane and us, I believe we are trying to look at ways to get the embodied carbon before we get to the LCA and to the EPD to avoid some of those conversations around the fact that once you get to the EPD stage, that's your carbon. You can't, it's not as easy for you to change once you get to that design step. Certainly you could, but we want to avoid those conversations and get there faster. And for the most part, when we are talking about those conversations about embodied, we are specifically looking at public data and verified data instead of relying on our own selves to provide that. We want to go off of a common place of data. That way we are all talking apples to apples.
I echo Tristan's comments about the data. Many of them are relying on EcoInvent. We've talked to, like a priori, Autodesk is coming up with links to that same data. There's many other providers we are actively working with. So I absolutely echo that. And then there's more, right? There's many organizations that are driving these reductions. We are a member of this organization called Remade, which is a Department of Energy sponsored initiative. That's really all about reducing embodied carbon of manufacturing emissions. And they are looking at these different material categories, aluminum, steel, plastics, and they are doing some tremendous work to work with manufacturers to reduce come up with innovative technologies to reduce that embodied carbon. Similarly, we are part of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and they are looking at everything from collaborations, infrastructure improvements, policies that can help move the needle on embodied carbon. So these are two organizations we're closely working with that are going beyond that measurement piece to how can we innovate, how can we drive advancements in technologies to help continue moving the needle on embodied carbon.
Are there any other manufacturers on the line here that have questions for Valerie, Nick, or Swathi, or Tristan?
Well, I'm not a manufacturer, but I do have a question. I wonder to them, is it more important to have more PCRs to define the rule of the games for different products? Or is it more important in defining the background information regarding the actual, for example, tons of steel per pound of galvanized steel or copper piping, just basic? Is it which kind of rule of the game is more important, defining the PCR of the equipment or defining the embodied carbon of the raw of the material used? Any thoughts on that? Like what should be the priority out of those two things?
So I would love for there to be more PCRs, and also for the PCRs to be more detailed. They leave a lot up to the manufacturer to decide what it looks like. And I personally would love to have clearly defined and specifics of everything that should be included so that we can compare across the board to other similar products. And right now, I think that that's a gap.
And also I would add to that, PCRs defined by independent organizations. So that way we are all comparing apples to apples.
I agree on that too. That's something we just recently, the one we're completing on our fans, the feedback from market has been, well, we can't use it for competitive evaluation because, you know, others may view theirs differently, and suddenly it becomes less useful other than you have a document. But if it can't be used for a third party to compare, there's not as much benefit in my mind for the customer, because it's just, okay, well, here's a general mass. Luke, I think you're probably onto something in that. Is there a comprehensive way to evaluate material to material? We're a little more disruptive in that, where you know, others here are more directly in line with each other or somewhat similar. We're definitely the outlier. Comparing to the industry, comparing our product to a metal duct, it's something that we see more evaluations like that than maybe others may.
Yeah. I think we got about maybe 5 more minutes for just open questions from anyone. Like to unmute and off room.
The other comment I would say, this is Nick again at Ductsox. The other comment would be, you know, where's ASHRAE with this? You know, and how can we connect with local ASHRAE chapters to have engagement, not only nationally, but locally? And we're trying to engage with the ASHRAE chapters to identify those opportunities where there are signatories in most markets. You know, can we get in front of those groups and start talking about it and increase the conversations from those local organization meetings? I think that would be a useful tact. And companies that are, and I think as others have mentioned, that taking the leadership, I think Valerie mentioned it, we're all trying to maintain a little bit of a leadership in this marketplace. If we can get a couple of market leaders like ourselves together and have a conversation in different markets, it would definitely be advantageous.
This is Marcel Rakas from a German manufacturer of heating, cooling, ventilation products. And one thing that surprises me, what I haven't heard so far, is a huge driver for the creation of EPDs for us in Europe, in Germany, and in Great Britain are building sustainability certificates, like, for example, BREEAM, or maybe in Germany, the DGNB. Those certificates ask for LCA data, especially in form of EPDs. And those are a huge driver in Europe. And I haven't heard of any like certificates like that from these discussions. Is this something that may push the need for EPDs in the US as well?
I could try to answer a little bit of that. So currently the structure for LCA requirements in the US is mostly focused around structures, foundations, and enclosures, where MEP scope is not a mandatory part of that kind of calculation. So if you hear 500 kg CO2 per meter squared, that is just structures, foundations, and enclosures, nothing else. And I'm not actually sure in the kind of global market how often you'll see a full MEP scope defined. And I think that's the part that we're struggling with. You don't have enough EPDs to get to the point where you can report. So it's a bit of chicken and egg.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, the initiatives that we're starting to see is actually more, and I think others had mentioned it, from the client base, in that they're trying to establish certain in-house initiatives on percentage of reduction. I'm curious to have discussions today here with, we've got several people we'll be meeting with in California, and discussions yesterday really led that some of their requirements here are leading the market. So I'm curious to see how the discussion is today regarding this initiative. I think we've got between 800 and 1,000 people coming for an event. So I will be talking quite a bit on this group's behalf today, trying to start a little bit of a fire out here for us and see if we can find out what's going on, if we will, in the Southern California market with some of the engineers and the contractors and what their perspective and awareness is.
Well, I want to add a couple of things is regarding certificate. Yeah, in the beginning, now they are asking for architecture and structure, but I don't think that will stop. It's just a matter of time they will get into MEP, especially the refrigerant is such an important piece of that discussion. The second point I want to touch on is, Nick, you mentioned earlier, is somewhat what's S-Ray role in this discussion. S-Ray, and I'm not speaking for S-Ray, I just happen to be one of the person involved, and there's early talk between S-Ray and HRI and other organization. It's exactly what you talk about, right? Like an independent organization to set up the rules of the game so that it's fair play field for everybody. So that's what S-Ray is doing right now, or considering doing right now. Early talks.
That's great to hear. And I know that we've got some members on our team that's been involved in the chair of like TC53 for room air distribution and TC52 for duct design. He's been chaired both subcommittees. So it's something that I know we weren't where we are now when he was in that position, but I know he's taking it to those groups to take a look at that and how that can be considered in, and for companies that are in those product categories. So.
All right, great. Well, thanks for all the discussion, everyone. And I see a lot of conversation in the chat as well. So I think with that, we'll move on to the remainder part of the program, but really thank you, Tristan, Valerie, Nick, and Swati for all the insights and information. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so next we want to move over and talk about some sample specification language. So one of the next things that we are thinking about in this area is how we can ask for it formally. So what might specifications look like in the future from engineers that go out with the jobs that then ultimately your companies, manufacturing companies will be responding to. So at this point, we've been iterating through just some draft language and ideas. I think this is good to put out here with this group. And I think, you know, finding perhaps a few manufacturer partners that might want to be a part of this effort could be helpful as well, so that as these things are written, we can come together on what makes sense and how we can do that. But so I'm going to have Jacob come on the line and just briefly talk about some work that he's been doing with some others in this topic. Again, this is just a brief introduction, and we're going to have more on this within the working group going forward. So that'd be a good place to plug in then. So Jacob, I can kind of flip through. You can guide me.
Perfect. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Jacob Schwartz. I'm a mechanical designer with Intropa. And yeah, I've been working with this group to kind of help develop this specification language. And so, yeah, so kind of as Adam has said, the kind of goal of this is to develop language which can be used and adopted for master specifications. Kind of the main goals of this specification are to define what an acceptable embodied carbon submittal is. So, you know, what can we all agree on that is going to be acceptable? We also kind of want it to be used as an educating tool at this point. So it also strives to provide guidance when there currently isn't any submittal data available. And then as a consequence, we're trying to use it to provide guidance as to which products should require submittal. Next slide. So this is kind of the core of this specification. Basically, when we're asking for a submittal, you know, some are going to be better than others. So we've kind of created this language, which is a hierarchy, which is basically saying what is the most preferred submittal and least preferred but still acceptable submittal. And so in this list right now, we basically have EPDs and TM65 manufacturing forms. I'll speak a little bit about TM65 after this slide, but essentially, you know, they're kind of the least desirable but still acceptable forms of a submittal that could be kind of meaningful and valuable. And then after that, there are the kind of different tiers of EPDs which could be used. You know, so a product specific, faculty specific EPD, you know, something that is very explicitly related to the product at hand. And then as we go down the list, we get lower and lower desirable submittals. Next slide. And so, yeah, I just kind of wanted to speak a little bit about TM65 because it is something that we're wanting to include in this spec, and which I think will have value for the industry moving forward. And so what it is, very briefly, it is a calculation methodology, which is providing a conservative intermediate estimate of the embodied carbon of a product. And so this is no means kind of meant to be the end all be all form. That's kind of what an EPD is, but this TM65 offers a way to kind of fill the gap between there's nothing and an EPD, which can take a long time to achieve or to get. So, and then another, you know, huge benefit of that is that it can help guide what EPDs we do want to go for. Because I think worth noting that with the TM65, kind of the bare minimum information required that is maybe a bit novel and you can't already find from schedules is a material breakdown. And so essentially, if you can provide that material breakdown, the rest of the information is available, and we can kind of use assumptions that will allow us to kind of create, give an estimate of the embodied carbon that can kind of lead us to lead us to choose which EPDs we want to focus on. Yeah, so that's TM65 in a nutshell. Happy to chat with anyone else more about this in the future. Okay, and so in terms of speaking with you all, I think it could be very valuable that part of the specification, we want to decide which products would actually require a submittal. And so there are, some criteria that we can use. I mean, like for basically, these are kind of suggestions. We could look at the weight of the product. We could look at the overall cost of the product. We could maybe try to choose something that is a major piece of equipment. Ideally, we would, choose submittals, like look at existing data and use existing embodied carbon data to decide what is going to require submittals so that we can kind of capture that impact. But obviously, we don't have that data currently. And so this is kind of a first pass attempt at looking at this sort of thing. But we would definitely appreciate feedback from manufacturers moving forward in order to kind of make this more nuanced for our first iteration of this specification. Next slide, please. And so then this is sort of just like a speculation hypothetical. In the future, when we have this data, it would be really nice if we could standardize some way to get a single number that could be taken from these submittals and associated with the schedule of the product. And I think this would have two very valuable qualities. It would bring embodied carbon considerations into the design process. So the mechanical designers need to be aware, and they see this number and able to kind of make decisions based on this number. So it's giving the designers an intuition for the embodied carbon of products. And this is to my right. This is just a thing I put together as like what a minimalist sort of what it could look like. But yeah, and so I think that's kind of all I had. Love to work with any manufacturers interested in having input on this in terms of what's realistic moving forward. But yeah, turn it back to Adam. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. Yeah, and I think the invitation here is that folks that have interest, please reach out. Maybe you can put your name in the chat. We can be added to the working group and figure out how we can coalesce around the specification and where it would live. And ultimately, it'll manufacturer reps will at some point see this and say, what the heck is this? So we want to make sure that we're kind of ahead of that side of it as well. So then the next piece, just briefly before we go to working group updates, Kate Hitchcock's with P&L had been involved with the working group and is involved with an incubator, which she can describe a little bit in the past, to help move forward, break down some of the barriers to getting this data going forward. So I just wanted to invite Kate on just to say a few words about the work they've done in the past and really extend an invitation to potentially put together something like this for HVAC and other MEP equipment in the future. So Kate, if you want to say a few words.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I'll try to keep it to just a couple minutes. So just, yeah, in the quickest summary, we at P&L, we've been working on what we're kind of calling like a lighting case study, working with the lighting industry, independent stakeholders, and as well with a particular group that's calling themselves an incubator. So there's the Green Light Alliance has a life cycle assessment incubator for lighting products, and where they've been working with a good number of lighting manufacturers to gather data, I think mainly probably through GATE, to create industry average EPDs so that there's something to start pointing to within the lighting industry. And I think it really got a lot of momentum with those partners because they've started on the process of gathering that data and are really getting familiar with the type of effort that's required. And so that is a separate effort. And at P&L, we've been looking at trying to identify what are some of the barriers for lighting, electronics, and mechanical products to achieving an EPD. And so sort of through that process, we've created a life cycle inventory template that can align with a PCR. And so we've been working with some specific lighting industry partners to update the PCR to align with the American Center for Life Cycle Assessment open standard in North America, and other requirements through the Buy Clean regulations. So making sure that the life cycle assessment includes the sort of 3 tiers that are required for that federal procurement. So sort of updating the PCR to those North American requirements, and then streamlining the data collection process, and working on a template that allows for a great deal of life cycle information at the early stages, so that the manufacturers can iterate and look for hotspots, and then potentially, hopefully a lot easier to get an EPD at the end of that. So anyway, that's what we've been doing in a nutshell. And we are looking at the template itself is very scalable. So we already have a lot of interest from some other building materials that don't have that use phase component, but we would love to find an opportunity to work with a group of MEP participants who could take advantage of that template and the process, and the guidance that we've developed around the ACLCA open standard and how to update the PCR. So just sort of providing some resources. Obviously the PCR development is an independent group, but we just have some sort of guidance that we've been working on. And so I think that could easily translate to the MEP industry. And so anyway, we're just thinking about what that might look like, and really appreciate the opportunity to just talk about it here today. So, we'd love to hear if there's interest in potentially participating in a similar type of effort. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Kate. So I guess in summary, here, the manufacturer EPD working group, we've really, the open questions we have right now are, which products do we want to start to ask for these EPDs, LCAs, TM65 first? What kind of specification language should we be putting out there to market as we start to ask for these? And then continuing the discussion with manufacturers and other interested parties on developing these materials, potentially creating an incubator with external resources to also help reduce the barriers to starting down this path. So I think our biggest ask from this, and hearing from our manufacturers on the panel today, is if you have interest to continue to advance this and get engaged and help move things forward, then put your name in the chat and we will certainly reach back out to you to start and continue this going forward, so we can have more discussions like this and other things in the working group. So thank you, Jacob and Kate. So with that, we'll go into the last segment here, which is working group updates. So we'll do a wrap up there. So we'll start with the data analytics reporting group.
I believe that's me. So we wanted to just sort of provide an update of what we've worked on. We've kind of had a little progress on several items. One of the main pieces is the refrigerant impact calculator, and there was able to have another data set of refrigerants added to that just recently. So Trane had put out a really nice graphic with data sets for several of the refrigerants that are alternatives in the market that we didn't currently have incorporated, mainly 513A, 1233 ZDE, and a few others. So those are all now incorporated in the refrigerant impact calculator. So check that out and see, find ways that you can start to kick the tires and use that on your projects. We're also compiling a refrigerant focused manufacturer outreach letter, and that's going to be published through Building Green. So that's sort of a work in progress. We have a preliminary draft going, and then, but that's going to need a couple more rounds of review, but we're targeting to be able to have that done before or for the next forum there. And then as part of that, you know, we're looking towards coordinating content for the next forum to be similar to today's conversation, but rather than being EPD focused, really being refrigerant focused. So, you know, if the folks from Trane or Carrier would like to be part of that, we'd love to have y'all, because you guys are big pieces of that conversation with respect to refrigerant transition and options and sort of what's coming there. So may reach out to y'all about coordinating that, as well as a few other manufacturers to talk about refrigerants. And then we have put out an ask for Revit models that are LOD 300 or better to look at EC3 TallyCat compatibility. So if anyone's got models that they'd like to contribute there, please contact me or Ante, and we can get those to the right people.
Hey, Corey. This is
Yep.
Steve Kwiak with Trane Technologies. I'm a distinguished lecturer for refrigerants, and if you want to invite me to give a
Yeah.
presentation on where the industry is moving and what the goals have to be and stuff, just I can just give my ASHRAE presentation to the group. So
Excellent. Yeah, no, I'll definitely note to include you as we put that together. Thanks for letting us know.
Yep.
Great, thanks, Corey.
No problem.
Next to communication resources. To Andrew or Stephen. Yeah, well, I can cover it here then. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have the new LinkedIn channel added. So if you haven't done that already, please log on and follow the page and get the updates. Our website is a good central location. These forums are recorded there for everyone to look at, or for other people that could not attend to be able to see what was discussed. Another big push is that we have company plans. So for all that were signatories, we're now moving to the phase where we're looking for each signatory to submit a plan. So there'll be more on that discussion in future forums, but that's also through the website as well. And yeah, as you have others in the organization that want to support the effort here overall, please invite them in to be a part of the group. Manufacturing EPDs, I think we've been through this as far as the updates. So a big part of us was putting on this forum here today. We do have refrigerant EPD letters to manufacturers available at the website. So part of our call, and we've heard from our presenters today that, you know, demand from industry really helps drive action from them. So submitting these letters, or if you're trying to ask for information on a product, or some templates available from the website that you can use for that. And then we'll continue to have discussions with manufacturers and advancing the spec language and other things that we're working on there. And with that, the Q2 forum, we'll send out an announcement for that soon. I'd assume that would probably be in the May timeframe. And with that, I think we are a wrap for today.